You want answers?
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
You want answers?
You have offended my family.
I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth.
And you have offended a Shaolin temple.
You can't handle the truth.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Radical Rant.
All right, got a few things to talk about for today's Radical Rant, and most recently I just penned an article for hightimes.com with respect to it was a note I got from Stephen Gutwillig out at the Drug Policy Alliance, and they were pointing out that this Saturday is International Overdose Prevention Day, and wanted to raise awareness about overdose deaths. And most interesting stat I found here is that in the year 2010, for the first time, overdose deaths from drugs became the leading injury cause of death. Now, not just the overall cause of death, because that's still heart disease, right? But, for injury cause of death, drug overdose is now the leading injury cause of death. And in fact, for people aged 25 to 64, more people die of drug overdoses than from car crashes. So the Drug Policy Alliance is wanting us all to recognize that Saturday, August 31st, is International Overdose Awareness Day. And I just wanted to take a look at that with the perspective of those of us who are fighting for marijuana legalization, because my belief, if we legalize marijuana, we could overcome a lot of these overdose deaths. Here's some stats for you. Drug overdose deaths have more than doubled since 1999. According to the Centers for Disease Control, 60% of overdose deaths in 2010 were related to prescription pharmaceuticals. And of those 22,000 plus deaths, 3 out of 4 were related to opioid painkillers like OxyContin, Vicodin, and Dilaudid. And 3 out of 10 were related to benzodiazepines like Valium, Xanax, and Ambien. And yes, 75% plus 30% is 105%. There were some overdoses that were from both drugs, so that's the reason for that. Now, why this is frustrating is because cannabis, we have found, works synergistically with opioids to kill pain. If you use cannabis along with Vicodin, cannabis along with OxyContin, cannabis with Dilaudid, you'll have to use less OxyContin, Vicodin, or Dilaudid to achieve the same effect. In fact, when they studied the patients at the Berkeley Patients Group in California, they found that their patients that were using opioid painkillers, 2/3 of them were able to reduce the amount of opiate prescriptions they had to use to achieve the same effect. Reductions from as much as 1/3 to half the number of pills. How many of those 22,000 overdose deaths from prescription opiates could have been avoided if cannabis had been a legitimate treatment option? How many of the deaths from Xanax, Ambien, and Valium could have been avoided if people could have used cannabis for their anxiety or their insomnia? And another potential cause for the doubling in prescription overdose deaths can be traced to their marketing. Prior to 1997, advertisement for pharmaceuticals was extremely limited. But thanks to a rule change at the FDA that year, Big Pharma was freed up to market its drugs direct to you, the consumer. The United States and New Zealand are the only countries in the world that allow a drug company to market directly to you. And in other nations, Big Pharma is mostly limited to marketing to doctors, people who should have some expertise on the matter. Now, here's another stat. In 1995, Big Pharma spent $340 million advertising its drugs, and again, mostly advertising them to doctors and hospitals. In 2009, the advertising budget for Big Pharma was $4.5 billion. That's an increase of 1,300%. Now, for the other 40% of the drug overdoses that are related to illicit drugs like cocaine, meth, heroin, and so on, we'd like to note that the widespread use of drug testing in academia and in the job market is incredibly biased against cannabis consumers. Marijuana metabolites are going to show up in your test for days, far longer than the metabolites for cocaine, meth, heroin, and other drugs are flushed from your system. And few schools or jobs are testing for alcohol abuse. So this creates a perverse incentive for those who want to use recreational drugs to choose ones that, unlike cannabis, could cause a fatal overdose. And in the unfortunate case that someone does overdose, laws criminalizing the possession of cannabis and other drugs work to prevent witnesses from calling for emergency medical help. You know, just in case the witnesses might have some weed on them and they get arrested and jailed. Now, Drug Policy Alliance has been working since 2007 to help pass what are called 911 Good Samaritan laws. And they've passed them in 13 states and Washington, D.C. These laws provide some level of immunity from arrest and prosecution if the possessor of drugs is calling 911 to help someone out with a drug overdose. Now, this is a good start. But keep in mind, the legalization of possession in Washington and Colorado freed every pot smoker to call 911, and not just for drug overdoses, but also to report criminal activity. Doesn't that sound like a better solution? Why should the pot smoker only be able to call 911 when someone's overdosing? How about being able to call 911 when someone's broken into your house? I was reading a story on, I can't remember if it was Salon or what outlet it was. Maybe it was Ladybud. I think it was Ladybud. About a woman whose house had been broken into for the third time. And she called cops to check out the break-in. And they didn't do much investigation of the break-in, but once they smelled pot in the house, they did a whole lot of investigation of her personal effects, of her drawers, until they could find something to bust her for. And it's because we've set up this perverse profit incentive. There's not a whole lot of profit for the cops in spending a lot of investigatory time trying to find who broke into your house. If they find the stuff the person stole, they just have to give it back to you. But in the case of a drug crime, they can boost their stats, they can get a bunch of arrests, and if they find any money or property, they get to keep it for themselves. So these are things that I think everyone should think about with respect to International Overdose Day. And finally, to round up this rant, I just want to go back to the Obama administration memo, the Department of Justice memo, to let you know that Project SAM has already released a news release on this. And of course, they're predicting the end of the world as we know it. I've got a satire up on smartapproaches.com if you'd like to read that. But I just wanted to point out, they make a point that in 2009, when the Ogden memo came out, all these medical marijuana dispensaries just suddenly, sprang into existence and caused all these terrible harms. Here's some of the statistical differences between 2009 and 2011 in California, Colorado, Michigan, and Oregon, where the most dispensaries opened up. Traffic fatalities went down. People who've tried marijuana went down. Children who've tried marijuana, well, it went up a little in California and Colorado, went down in Michigan and Oregon. State domestic product, that would be how productive the economies are, went up in all 4 states. Injuries and illnesses per 100 workers went up in all the states that had data. Went down. There were fewer injuries and illnesses, fewer missed days of work since 2009. High school graduation rates went up in every state. They went down 0.1% in Colorado. But otherwise, high school graduation rates went up. Violent crime per 100,000 persons went down in all 4 of those states. So clearly there's a connection between the commercialization of marijuana in the medical marijuana industries in those 4 states in 2009 and nothing bad happening in 2011. The sky is not falling. The Chicken Littles of the rehabitionists, the Chicken Littles of the prohibitionists are finally being exposed. Even the Attorney General doesn't believe them anymore. And I, for one, am going to enjoy watching Kevin Sabet and his ilk slowly fade into obscurity as America accepts legal marijuana. That's all the time we got for today. For Brian the Red, I'm Radical Russ. Thanks for joining us. And until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it.